I'm just going to keep it in the video just so that everyone else kind of knows how this is going to work. But as I mentioned to you all before, you don't need to raise your hands. You don't need to wait for anyone to kind of call on you in order to speak. So it's kind of like just an open, organic conversation. I'll kind of kick us off with the topic that I kind of present you all that we're going to start with as far as kind of what it means to be Asian or part of the Asian communities and, feeling too Asian in some spaces or instances and maybe not feeling Asian enough in others. And like, you are welcome to ask each other questions too. If you're curious about something, like, don't be afraid to be like, oh, I'd love to know a little bit more about that. And also on the flip side, don't feel pressured to have to answer anything that you don't want to answer. And you can respectfully decline or give as little or as much information as you feel like you'd want. Do your best to just speak from your own experiences and avoid kind of speaking for whole groups of people or going beyond, your own maybe feelings or things that you've actually experienced personally. If you do feel like you need to take a break or maybe something comes up and you just need to step away, like you're welcome to do so. And you can even private message me if you want to, or you could just like turn your camera off for a little bit and we'll kind of all just understand you need a moment. So don't worry about that. And obviously everyone here, I know you're all respectful, but I'm just going to say that just to put it out there that please be respectful of everyone's perspectives. And, we don't all have to agree on a certain thing, especially because we're kind of going based off of our experiences. And just do your best to be mindful if you're taking up like a lot of space or you feel like you're speaking a lot and just take a step back and just be mindful of it. But again, we're not like going to be super strict on things. And then these are just some permissions just in case it's needed by anybody. Your experiences are all valid. And that's kind of the point of this is that we have people with different experiences and some that are similar. So don't be afraid to share if you feel like sharing on something, even if it seems to be outside of what everyone else is kind of like talking about. So my name is Sam. My pronouns are she, her, and a little bit about my identity is I'm fourth generation on both parents' sides, half Japanese, half Chinese. I grew up in LA, lived there my entire life until, the last few months. It was my first time moving cross country. So now I'm in Washington State and kind of experiencing a new way of being here, a different culture, new scenery, and a lot more trees and nature. So that's a little bit about me. And I'm going to call on Joannie next. And so again, you can share as little or as much as you'd like about your background and who you are.
Hey everyone, my name is Joannie Yang. I reside in LA, California. I'm the founder of Braindom Inc. We do live training and facilitation with organizations. I'll pass it to Kelly.
Hello, everybody. My name is Kelly Friedman, pronouns she, her, and hers. I'm also located in Los Angeles. I'm a native Californian, but I've lived in New York for a time and also Tokyo. I'm the founder of Never Not Biased, a diversity, equity, and inclusion consulting company. And I am also currently working with LA County in a full-time capacity as a leadership development facilitator. So I love learning and also talking about identity and culture and how we're all connected. I'll pass it to Aussie.
Hi, Kelly. Hi, everybody. I am originally I was born in Burma, or Myanmar, as it's called now, and my parents migrated to Australia and grew up there for a little while, moved to the US, and my background, I suppose, is Chinese, but there's lots of generational intersections within my grandparents' era, all over Asia. So yeah, I love spirituality and connecting with people and talking about the things that we're going to be talking about today. And I would love to learn lots more about you folks here today. So, and I would love to pass it on to Matthew.
Thanks, Aussie. Yeah, so my name is Matthew Yonamura. My pronouns are he, him, his. I am the program coordinator for Changing Tides. We are a program of Little Tokyo Service Center. We're all about destigmatizing mental health as well as providing mental health resources to young adults. And we especially prioritize an AAPI mental health, but I'm sure we'll be talking about mental health later on, so I'll save some of my spiel. And yeah, I'm from Redondo Beach, California, so I've been native to SoCal pretty much my entire life. I went to college in Chicago, where I got my Bachelor in Fine Arts in directing. And yeah, I have a passion for filmmaking, and I also have a huge passion for the AAPI community and mental health. So really excited to share space here today. I think Nisha, I think we're saving the best for the last, I think.
And also apparently the only East Coaster. I am here in New York City. Nisha, nice to meet everyone. My pronouns are she, her, hers. And I co-founded a startup called Anise Health, which offers personalized and culturally responsive mental health services to the AAPI community. So yeah, right, kind of in the same boat as you, Matthew. Really passionate about the space and have worked at the intersection of healthcare and business, which is what I studied my entire career. But I think, as with a lot of us in this room, our personal journeys are kind of what brought us to where we are right now. So I'll go ahead and get a little personal and just share a little bit of why I started Anise, which also introduces me a bit better. I'm second generation South Asian American, and my family is fairly traditional. So I just grew up in a household that was extremely closed off when it came to talking about mental health. You know, I got a lot of the you're too emotional, you need to toughen up, you need to get over it from my parents. And unfortunately, what that meant for me is I just became really bad at asking for help. Whenever I struggle with something, I tend to kind of close up and try to figure it out myself. And in college, unfortunately, I had witnessed the loss of 14 classmates of mine to suicide, and most of those people were Asian. So for me, that was a huge red flag moment where I was just like, oh my gosh, this is the devastating impact of untreated mental illness. And it hit very close to home to me as I was going through my own share of issues and struggling to open up to someone about it. So unfortunately, when I did finally start trying to seek care, I wasn't really met with a super effective system. And yeah, that is really, in a nutshell, what sent me down this road of wanting to do something about it, really build something and try to find solutions to a lot of the problems that our community faces, but doesn't really feel like anyone's out there solving it for us. So yeah, just really excited to share this space with all of you.
I have a question. Just maybe this will just kick off, like, because I know in the Asian just upbringing, culture and whatnot, mental health and all of that is not talked about. But now a couple of you have shifted into that industry of mental health and supporting the AAPI community. How has your parents reacted to that? Or do they just not know what you do?
I can start. When I first started, they've never not been supportive of it, but when I first started, they were very confused about what it was. To give a little context, my dad is a doctor, and in the South Asian community, it's just common. It's like everyone's either a doctor or an engineer. So everyone only had heard of psychiatry. They'd only ever heard of like medications for anyone who has a mental health need. And so their interpretation of mental health was like, you have to be crazy, quote unquote, in order to go see someone. And so when I introduced to them this concept of like therapy and coaching, and you know, anyone with any issue, no matter how small or big, can really benefit from trying to talk to someone and build some skills around trying to better themselves, that was like a totally foreign concept to them. And they were just, again, kind of like okay, she's working on this little project, like it's not going to go anywhere. I will say, I'll give them credit. Since I've started working on it, they have grown a ton. And I think that's in part due to the fact that I have grown a ton, and have become more open to having hard conversations with them. So, I've asked them questions like, how come you never told me you were proud of me when we were growing up? How come you always told me that my emotion was like a bad thing instead of recognizing it could be a good thing? And in asking them those things that I never felt comfortable asking them before, they opened up, and I've started to learn a lot more about them than I ever really knew before. So overall, it's been a good thing, but it's been a little bit of an uphill battle.
I could share kind of a similar but different experience in that, my parents have definitely grown a lot in regard to mental health and discussing it. I think the difference for me is that I was I experienced a lot in high school. I was a really outgoing kid, and it's kind of like an embarrassing thing now, but I was like student body president, and like I had to be out in the pep rallies and like my tutu and like the face paint and like really out there, but there was just a point in my senior year of high school where I had to do it, or I felt like I had to. And then immediately after, I felt drained. I couldn't talk to anyone, and it was the depression that was brewing for like 2 years. I didn't know how to call it what it was, and I it was ongoing, and I could never figure out an explanation for it. But then I remembered, for some reason it came to mind, that when I was a little kid, like 5 or 6 maybe, I remember my dad saying something about a chemical imbalance. And I don't even think he said it to me. It was probably to my mom, and I overheard it. And at the time, I was like, he has a stomach ache. Like, what's he gonna do? Like, he just needs to take an antacid. Then I learned what a chemical imbalance is in my senior year of high school. And I was like, well, let me look into it. And I was like, this sounds like me. I talked to my parents, and they're like, okay, let's, thank you for telling us this. Let's take you to the doctor. So immediately it was immediate, let's get help if you think you need it. We're supportive 100%. I think the way that my dad has grown, because, he had a chemical imbalance as well, and he has depression as well, um, is that by me working with Changing Tides and by me opening up about my mental health story when I experienced it my senior year. I did a story in the yearbook about my depression because no one was talking about it. I was like, well, I'm talking to my peers, everyone else is feeling this. But from my senior year to my work with Changing Tides now, he was encouraged to open up, to talk about it, to talk to his colleagues, see how they're doing, and he is now volunteering with Changing Tides as one of our intergenerational, committee members who, offers his expertise as, someone who's worked in the professional fields. And I think there's just been a lot of growth that we're seeing through our work, and then it impacts our families when they're encouraged by the improvements made through our organizations. So I could really relate to you, Nisha, just to see the growth. And it could be hard for me, at least. It's scary to put myself out there like that. But after seeing the impact of being outward and being honest about my experiences, I'm seeing that so many others have that same strength and courage, and it's just a it's just a ripple effect of people being able to make change.
I'm actually curious to ask the same question to Joannie and Kelly in relation to like DEI work. And then Aussie, you obviously have a very different experience as well, if you're all open to sharing.
My parents don't know what I do. And I think it's best that way because when I left the corporate world, I'm the oldest of four. So when I left the corporate world, it was almost like devastating for them because it was like, oh my gosh, what are you doing? You're messing up your life. You ruined everything. Like you're going out into the unknown with no stability. And then 5 years later, I mean, they see me now. They've learned to accept it. Like, okay, she has her own thing. As long as she's happy, she's doing well, that's fine. And all I just tell them is like, I just work from home and that's all you need to know. It's like, okay. And so they try to poke in a little bit. I tried explaining it to them once and they just didn't get it. So I was like, I'm not even going to try in a way because I might get upset, they might get upset, and we've come a long way where we learn to accept where we're at. So I was like, I'm just gonna leave it as is. And I just tell them, I train with people in HR and they just take it as, oh, she's in HR. I was like, yeah, sure, go for it. So I just give it enough minimum description for them to feel like, okay, she's good and we don't have to worry about her.
Yeah, Joannie, I also have been struggling to get understanding from my parents. I started my career as a classroom teacher, so a very traditional, like linear career path. And when I told them that, burnout was inevitable and that I wanted to do more, I had completed a master's that it was in liberal studies, and I chose to do my research on microaggressions and implicit bias, which opened up the industry of diversity, equity, and inclusion to me as like a potential career path and a potential way to impact change with adults, as much as impacting change in young minds is absolutely valuable. I was reflecting, I can prepare these students and what happens when they enter the workforce and are encountering systemic bias and just lack of awareness and education from their peers and their colleagues. And only recently have I really tried to make it personal for my family. I didn't explain earlier, I'm part Chinese, part Jewish, part Swedish, part Polish. My family is quite blended, and it's not something we ever talked about. So I'm now I'm going in backwards where I'm learning, I'm doing the necessary education about how do I access my different identities and honor the different cultures that I belong to? How do I encourage other people to do this and to also honor and acknowledge diversity in the workplace? And then back to my parents, it's kind of like, okay, so this is something that I feel like was missing. I had a really blessed, privileged upbringing, and if we had addressed the fact that our family was multiracial, multi-ethnic, multi-faith, I would have felt a little more prepared to navigate the very racialized world that we live in. And then now, as I plan to have a family that will be multiracial, it's an ongoing conversation. So while my parents are not anti-diversity, equity, and inclusion, they were also kind of, like, oh yeah, we did our unconscious bias training. I did that. And not a lot of depth or discussion about why we do that or whether it was meaningful for them.
I'm so sorry. I have a quick question for both Joannie and Kelly.
Mhm.
The first time I heard that anyone had a opposition to DEI was the wonderful, the talented, the wickedly smart Elon Musk saying how DEI is racist. And I'm wondering if that was the first time I heard that. Is that something that either of you or both of you like experience on a regular, that people are actually, I just don't understand the opposition to it, like in any way, shape, or form.
Definitely. Thank you for bringing the real questions here. I'm going to speak generally at this moment and say the backlash to DEI is here. And whenever there are systems of power that are being challenged, the backlash will be well-funded and vocal, and a little, a little disappointing, because it really is, saying DEI is racist is a will to preserve the systems that we currently have. That the systems that Elon Musk has become successful in work for him. And for him and many people like him, they would rather it not change. Which is why it's challenging. I have a challenge with my own parents, don't you want a different world that's more inclusive for your family?
And to add to that, it's almost like we're disrupting the whole world in how it used to be. And now with social media and the newer generation, it's like, no, we're going to fight for what's right for the next generation, for the future generation. Versus, I know with my parents, with immigrants, it's like, don't rock the boat, don't cause chaos. And it's like, just stay in line and follow the rules. And to us, it's like, why? Like, why do we have to, like, what's the worst that can happen? Okay, we get thrown in jail? For what? There's the freedom of speech, but then it's now, are we personally and mentally strong enough to just continue this fight that have maybe been ongoing for years, decades, and centuries that no one really talked about, but now the more people talk about, it's now surfacing as, ooh, it's a new thing, it's a new trend, but it's like, no, we're just starting to finally feel the comfort and the confidence to speak up as a group, to go for what's right and not take it as it is.
Oh, those are really great perspectives and experiences, and I really loved and enjoy listening to everyone. And so really hit the spot when, like, Nisha, you were mentioning about, and that when you said 14 of your classmates, I was like just stunned. That's a huge number. So speaking to someone else later down the line, like years down the line, when I went to see a hypnotherapist for like limiting beliefs and things like that, like homophobia, well, it's actually not external homophobia, and it's challenging. And, racism, like, it's just challenging. And you think, okay, I can inform them. I can, like, put love first and like put everything aside and speak to them in an honest way and caring way. And you try, but just it doesn't work. You end up being angry and frustrated. And I still try to this day. So it's now a practice of acceptance and a practice of forgiveness, and it's still a journey. So thank you for creating a safe space here. Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing.
Yeah. I'm glad that you felt compelled to share, because I think it's absolutely something that you need to talk about, and people need to hear also they're not alone. And the journey of acceptance and forgiveness is the forever journey, maybe.
I also was really touched by just the fact that you have the strength to keep trying to have those conversations and to keep going. That's not easy at all. So that's just a testament to your strength. And I hope you recognize that, but I definitely saw that.
And I think one of the things that stood out to me within, part of that sharing as well is something that I feel like is common to a lot of Asian and those who grew up maybe in more traditional households, those who may be influenced by the media and what Asian is meant to be, is like this idea of internalizing everything and not being able to speak out or speak up or, express our needs. And so I'm kind of curious if anyone wants to talk about maybe this. I'm kind of just gravitating towards Joanne for some reason to start with this. But like seeing that within like workspaces, friendship groups, or households, whatever that is, and just like kind of that journey of, you know, finding the voice and finding that ability to like speak out and like say the things. But Joanna, you don't have to go first if you don't want to, but putting it out there for anyone who might want to share on this.
I will let others go first so I can process what the question is.
I could go first.
Yeah,
Anyone else?
go for it.
And on that dang show where, you know, things were not right, or injustice that you're witnessing, or like, hey, something doesn't feel right here. Yeah, just your trust is being like damaged. It was really hard to call people out. It was really hard to speak up my truth. And it was the first time in my life where I like was forced to do that. And that show actually gave me that gift, to be able to walk out on a situation that wasn't healthy for me. And I knew like just my being is telling me something is wrong here. Get the hell out. Just not in a safe space at all with the people that were supposed to protect you. You know, you think that you're going into a situation, an environment like that where you trusted these people with all your, you know, psychological mental evaluations that you put honest everything into. You're following the rules that they've given you, you know. So it was just like no way in hell. And it was the first time in my life I ever stood up for myself, and me walking out, that was a forced thing. Like I had my back against the wall kind of a situation. And so and in other moments as well, you know, at the reunion, for example, that was also, even speaking up in that situation was because Sam spoke up first, you know. And so I think that's another thing where you kind of, and I told her many times, you helped me speak up in that moment because you opened the door for me. You slightly opened that door for me, and I stumbled the words out, but it was the first time where I ever called out that person for what they were doing. And so, yeah, it took a lot, months and months of processing and recovery. But I'm also very grateful that situation forced me to be able to stumble those words out. And I'm learning and like healing that so that I can feel the feeling and still go with the action of setting that boundary, or like, hey, don't speak to me in that way, or whatever that might look like, right? So yeah, I struggle with that in every area of my life.
I think part of why it feels so uncomfortable, just speaking for myself, but I've also observed this in a lot of other Asian Americans, is like what I talked about at the beginning. Like I struggle to seek help often. It's like almost like I feel selfish if I am looking out for myself above the needs of other people. And I think some of that comes from being raised in this like collectivist culture where I was always told to like put the needs of my family above my own. I think that creates a lot of like people-pleasing tendencies, and also tendencies to just, I don't know, it's like almost wanting to always be humble, or like not wanting to ruffle any feathers, wanting to like just put down our head and do the work. And I think some of that is also due to this stereotypical view of us as, you know, the quote unquote model minority. So it's like when I think about in the workplace, why we don't see enough Asian American leaders there, I think part of it is like I and many others have always struggled to self-advocate, you know, always struggle to really raise our voice and be loud and bang the table and say like, I want this, I need this. And I think that is kind of I mean, there are different ways to lead. Some people I think can lead more silently and like still do an awesome job. But I think that for many organizations, you do need to be a little bit more self-advocating. And I just, it doesn't come naturally to me. It's something that I've worked on really hard over the past 2-3 years. And, you know, and building your own business, as I'm sure others in this room can talk to, it's like you have to be your biggest cheerleader every day in order to get through some of the rough moments. So I think that's part of the trouble that exists in the workplace, is like both some of the stereotypes, but also just nature of like the environment that we grew up in, some cultural values, which at times I think can be a really good thing, but at other times I think can hold us back.
And to add to that, it's like we learn to respect our parents' wishes. So it's almost like you don't ask for things unless we give it to you. Or if you ask for things, it's almost like they go, at least for me, they go on this rant of how much they don't have, how they have very little coming over here. And it's almost like this guilt that we have if we ask for something, that sometimes it carries into the workplace of, ooh, should I ask for a promotion? I don't know. Or it's like, what if they say no? What if they think I'm greedy and XYZ? And it's like, all of that just gets into our head that we carried into the workplace. But then just like what you said, Nisha, is the self-advocating part. It's hard because the humble brag, even like in the Asian cultures, like, you don't do that. You can't do that. Don't be showing off. Like, just let the work show itself. But who in the world watches everything we do? Like, nobody micromanages our work to be able to say, you earn a gold star in XYZ. So it's like, when we don't do it and we just sit back and be more passive about our development, then we just get stuck in this, that we don't feel like we could speak up. And then when we do, is like what Aussie said, it's super uncomfortable, because what if we say the wrong thing? What if we perceive a certain way? And then all of this just gets into our head, is like, oh my gosh, it's like the unlearn what our parents taught us to relearn the new things in a different way that can shape us to have more Asians in the workplace. And last thing I'll say is, when I climbed the corporate ladder, I had a store manager from Belgium. She worked in China for 5 years. So she knew the Asian tendency of, you don't speak up because you don't want to challenge back. You don't want to have your own opinions because you want to respect authority. And she just straight up told me, Joannie, we hired you for you, so you need to speak up, because I didn't hire a robot just to do what the next or the previous manager did. Like, I needed new perspective. I was like, oh my gosh. And she jokingly say, I won't tell your parents. And I was like, that's when it hit me. I was like, you're right. Because if we talk back at home, we get like the belt, the backhand, the whatever it is, where it's like, I get nervous. But when she made that comment jokingly, it was like, oh, it's refreshing that it's okay to speak up, because my parents won't know. No, there's no report card that goes home. And it's like, it's in the workplace that I can redevelop and reform who I want to be. And my parents won't even know what type of person I am. So it's like, yeah, I could be the highest potential at work that my parents didn't think it was possible.
That's so good. Kelly or Matthew, did you want to add anything?
Kelly, you could go ahead.
Okay, I'll take that. Catch that ball. I'm thinking, yeah, a lot about this deference to our parents, or as I see it, deference to elders, and also authority is the cultural, it's almost countercultural or radical to then show up and be outspoken, to be direct. Also, I got feedback in one workplace that I just wasn't being direct. And on the one hand, when you're doing equity work, it's so important to be specific. And on the other hand, I know that it's a hot potato, and I don't want to blast anyone out of the water. I don't want to make anyone run and hide. And then also perfectionism. Perfectionism is the other side of what if I bring shame to my family? What will they think of me? Like, I have this strange inner monologue about, like, even what I put on my private social media, I'm worried about judgment. and like someone pulling up receipts 10 years from now because I want to be the best version of myself at all times in perpetuity is so unrealistic. And I can't say whether this is unique to the AAPI experience, but unlearning perfectionism has been an interesting experiment, especially in the workplace, right? Because I think a lot of workplaces want people to take risks in order to innovate, in order to be creative. And then what are the realities for that risk taking and how much safety is there actually?
Yeah, I just wanted to follow everyone else because I want to acknowledge, well, first off, I'm the only cishet male in this space. And it's similar in a social work capacity because the majority of the LTSC social work staff is female. And, what I have learned is many of the social workers I with who are AAPI women, they're so strong and so smart, but they don't flex it or they don't share it. It's a very much so we do the work. We're not looking for the praise. Let's clock in, help people, and do the job. And there's no one there to hype them up, tell them, what important work they're doing, even though I hope they know how important the work is. And I feel like in every space I come into, when it comes to mental health, I am pretty keenly aware of the perception of what mental health looks like. I think for some reason, I mean, there are a lot of female identifying um, therapists, but when I walk into a space, being a male uh, in the mental health space, I I'm pretty aware that I could come in and learn a lot from the others around me because I come in with a certain perspective as a cis het male that I've seen things through a certain light my whole life, being a man or being in locker rooms. It's a real thing, like some of the vulgar stuff that comes out of mouths in high school and whatever it is. And I try to come in and I listen to everyone here. I listen to everyone in this space that I come into, and I try to, I try to find my voice in the way where I'm not dominating a conversation. I come into a space where I want to learn more than anything. I think that's kind of the main way I've kind of flipped my voice when it comes into a mental health capacity because when I'm on a set, when I do my film work, if I'm directing, I'm the leading voice. I'm the one giving out the directions. And, even though I'm the program coordinator for Changing Tides, and a lot of people still come to me when they're looking for direction, I'm looking for direction just as much as everyone else because I want to learn from everyone else's perspective. So I think it's just such a collaborative capacity that I get to work in when it comes to mental health that I want everyone to feel that way, that it is collaborative, that everyone's voice can be heard. Because I think traditionally in most workspaces, someone like me is the one that is taking the space. And I don't want that to be the way it is here. We all could learn so much from one another where everyone's voice should be equal. And I think that's what I've been trying to learn from. I'm trying to learn from the the many social workers that I work with in that I should come in and do the work and I don't need to brag about it. But I want them to take a little bit from the director point of view where they should speak up and they should uh, be proud of it and they should, have somewhat of like a filmmaker's reel when, at the end of the year, filmmakers put out a reel to try to get jobs. I would love for the accolades of social workers to be out there because they deserve the praise for how much they're impacting one's life. So, um, yeah, I'm taking up space now in my explanation, but that's my long-winded way of saying that through collaboration and through the equal footing is where I think I try to speak, and I try to also be quiet and listen to others.
Well, that's one of the reasons why I was excited to have you join in on this conversation, because really, there aren't that many cis men who are in these spaces and having these conversations and willing to talk about it. But I mean, your voice is just as valuable to be heard and as valid of your experiences for everyone to hear as well. And so, trying our best. I think everyone here loves learning about other people, from at least what I know. And so, I mean, I'm so grateful just to even listen to all of you. But yeah, whoever wants to take it away, go for it. I just wanted to add that in.
I think another piece to finding a voice, or just being AAPI and being AAPI in the workplace. I do think it'll be interesting when, whenever the time comes, I'm no longer working at Changing Tides, because it's a youth-led or young adult-led organization, and at some point I can't call myself young adult. So at some point I have to let someone else take the reins of Changing Tides. And I think because it's such an AAPI focused area, I'm gonna need to. It's gonna be interesting when I enter more workplaces that aren't so AAPI focused. And I think it's been a really lucky experience to see. But I think that's why it's been so interesting to hear others' perspectives in this space, because I have had that luck. But I think one element to that is not feeling AAPI enough. I think a lot of people are unfortunately tokenized as one of the AAPI employees is at their place of work. For me, it's like I don't speak Japanese. There's been times when we have a staff get together and I sit down amongst my coworkers and I'm pretending to listen in, but I don't know what they're saying because they all happen to be speaking Japanese together. And I don't want to be rude and get up and sit somewhere else. But the reality is that I don't speak the language. So that is something that I deal with, is feeling like I'm not AAPI enough. But I'm sure there's people in this space who have either felt that or have felt the exact opposite, where it's like, oh, maybe I am here because I am API and they don't have they wanted the diversity higher. I don't know. But yeah, I think the AAPI voice is an interesting conversation for this group.
Yeah. I have so many thoughts. I'm trying to I'm trying to figure out how to make them all make sense. But I guess the first thing that I think about is for myself. I definitely had the privilege growing up in Florida of not necessarily feeling like a minority in a majority culture. I don't present as being very obviously South Asian. In fact, in my high school, like it was, I think, 95% Colombian and Puerto Rican, and everyone thought I was Hispanic. I think that was a privilege that I had, in the fact that I didn't have to feel like the minority fighting within that environment, fighting to kind of feel heard and understood and seen. I think my sisters, who do look more South Asian, I think dealt with many more of like the negative experiences of feeling like a minority, colorism being one of them. And then because people know you're South Asian, they also make comments like, oh, like your food smells, or you smell, or just, things that are very stereotypical. I didn't get a ton of that growing up. And I think what that did for me was it made me really proud of being South Asian. It made me want to share my culture with people who didn't know my culture, because I was like, I had the benefit of not being embarrassed by it, or I had the benefit of not having to like constantly want to be something that I wasn't. And I did witness a lot of my friends and my family have the opposite impact. So it got me thinking a lot about just like this feeling of belonging, and like how powerful it can be, of if you do feel a sense of belonging with like whoever the majority is, or whoever honestly you're surrounded by, it can make you like it can just help you feel so much more empowered to want to like turn your culture into strengths instead of weaknesses. I'm like very lucky to have had that experience, but I'm like trying to figure out how to like enable others to feel that. I think that's like what I hope we're all trying to kind of figure out. And a thought that I always think about, and I'm curious to hear like Kelly and Joannie's answers to this is we came across a study that was recently published by Bain that cited Asians as feeling the least included or the least sense of belonging in the workplace among all minority groups. And I thought that was really interesting because a lot of conversations we've had at Anise with employers and HR leaders is like Asians are often excluded from conversations around DE&I. A lot of the HR partners that we tried to like sell Anise to were like, oh, the Asian community is not really a priority of ours when it comes to DE&I, or in groups that are like, for example, in the tech industry in the Bay Area where there are a lot of Asians, it was like, oh, this might be too Asian for us. Like if we adopt this solution, then we might run the risk of appearing biased or like appearing like we're favoring the Asian population. I was like, when has that ever been the case? And when has that ever been an issue? But just such strange conversations in the process of trying to create that sense of belonging, like the pushback that we hear. This is really weird. I don't know. I'm just curious if that is normal in like the line of work that you guys are in. Like if you hear that, or I don't know, just curious to hear your thoughts.
Joannie, are you looking at me? Okay. I'm like picking up on what's coming through the Zoom. Definitely. Nisha, thank you for sharing more about your personal experience growing up. And I guess I'll start where you left off, which is this question of Asian belonging in the workplace. And what's jumping out at me is what the AAPI community itself is such a diverse community. And the pattern that I keep seeing in my consulting work is business resource groups or employee resource groups or affinity groups that are created for the AAPI group struggle with recruitment and retention and engagement, because it's kind of like we're trying to meet a lot of different needs and also from a variety of backgrounds and experiences. And some companies create like the DESI group, so it's like more specifically South Asian. But I haven't seen like other segmentation within AAPI. And it's really challenging because how do we, talk about speaking out, how do we advocate for ourselves as a collective when there's so much like communication and common ground that we are struggling to find within these like workplace affinity groups, let alone like in the real world across coalitions and solidarity. And I think class is also like the hidden identity marker that is always at play, but we're not talking about as much.
And to add to that, I actually work a lot with the AAPI ERGs and BRGs in big corporation, especially in tech. And it is a struggle for them to be able to advocate and fight for themselves. But I think it just takes maybe 3 or 4 individuals that lead that group to be able to then have their voice heard and then pave the way for others. Even though for them, it's sometimes they see it as unfair because it's like, I'm not getting support, I'm not getting the help. Why does it end up being us when we also have a day job that we're trying to do? And so that's where it is that balance of okay, how are organizations supporting them, but also how are their own peers supporting each other? Because I've also heard from other API individuals like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to get involved. I just want to do my work and go home. And it's like, well, don't you want to get promoted? It's like, yeah. So they're still in a way stuck in the way of just let the work show itself, while the other side is like, no, we shouldn't be able to do that. We should still be invited to the table without an invitation, or at least be known that, okay, we exist and we're here. Why do we always have to scream so loud? So it's almost like some of them have almost adopted that mentality of, if we scream the loudest, we'll get attention, while others is like, I don't want to scream so loud because my culture taught me not to do that. And so it's like finding that fine ground. And what I find very helpful is when these individuals can build a relationship with HR or build a relationship with an executive sponsor. That's where they're able to get some mentorship and some insights of how corporate America works, and then be able to incorporate or intertwine some of that, what they call the Asianness, into it. I was like, what is even Asianness? It's like, Asians are smart. Like, you all know what you're doing. It's just, how do you vocalize and advocate for what you could do, what you want to do, and create change without the fear of losing your job? I was like, whoever came up with that is wild. I was like, okay, we can take it one step at a time. But I do see in the future that we'll have more Asians represented if we continue to fight this uphill battle, but it does take a lot of effort and work. It has to be a two-way relationship, not just a one-way.
I'm also curious to hear some of Aussie's perspectives.
Yeah, even what Nisha was talking about, belonging within your Asian communities. Like, I'll start there because that was definitely what I experienced. I mean, it was like we're talking about diversity within the Asian culture, right? So in Asian API community, you know, like Vietnamese, a lot of Cantonese, and I came from Burma, you know, and so I didn't know anybody, and I still haven't met anyone that came from Burma. I don't, you know, I think there was one guy, he said he was from Burma, and I was my just eyes balls like, you know, wide open. I'm like, really? You're from Burma? Like, and so I haven't met any other folks from that area. So I did feel like an outsider. Coming with three intersections in API, you know, LGBTQ plus, and being assigned female at birth. It's just all those things I realize now have shaped me to be who I am. And it's I didn't know before your DI journey, Sam, when you were doing, you know, explaining all of these things to me, and I'm like, light bulbs are going off in my head. I'm like, oh, that happened to me, and oh, that happened to me. Oh, that's why I didn't see it as a disadvantage. I just thought, oh, that's just how it is. I just got to work harder, and I just got to, you know, just perform better and be perfect. To even get a bit of, kind of like fish in the water. Like, you don't know you're in it until someone shines a light on it and tells you, and then you go, oh wow, I had no idea that's what I was living in. That's the systems I'm battling, and that makes so much sense. And when I look back at all my experiences, it ties back to that, and now it gives me kind of a perspective of, okay, now I know it's not my failure. I'm not doing, you know, like I'm like burn myself up doing the best I can, you know, to be recognized. But that's not the way to be seen. You just grow up in that environment, and you just think that it's normal, that it's just something. I must not be working hard enough, right? So
Yeah, we somehow already are pretty much approaching an hour. I feel like you've all been just dropping so much wisdom. Like, I'm really excited to actually go back and like review the conversations and and share this. And so I wanted to just thank all of you for your willingness to participate and, you know, being one of the first groups that I'm having do this. So thank you so much. And also just for sharing your experiences and your thoughts and your vulnerabilities and all the things. And I do want to just like allow any last final thoughts. I'll give you a moment to think if you'd like of, you know, either something just that you'd like to share that came up for you as we're closing this out, or maybe even some more wisdom you'd like to, you know, offer to those who are listening in on this, or maybe even some ideas as far as how you think we can collaborate better or what you'd like to see out there. So yeah, don't feel rushed, but if you have something already, feel free to just unmute and give your last words before we wrap this up.
I think as a AAPI community, if we continue to stay strong together, then we could move the needle. We could make that change, because I don't know if you ever heard of like the crab mentality that some people have associated the API community with, where it's like in your upbringing, your parents always compared you to your cousins, your siblings, and it's like, so-and-so's a doctor, so-and-so's making this much, why aren't you? And so we almost have this internal competitiveness or even resentment towards them, where it's like we want to tear them down when we should really uplift them, and then they uplift us, and then it's like it's going to be a non-stop uplifting if we just shift that mentality to we're together versus you're fighting your battle and I'm fighting my battle. It's like, no, it's we're all in one community, because I mean, like we all said, API is diversity in its own way already. So it's not like the Chinese versus the Vietnamese versus the Korean versus the Japanese. It's like, no, it's we're all in one. And if the world sticks us in all in one category, then why not just fight it so we have a louder voice? And then as individual culture, then we can also learn from each other and then grow and complement in a way that, I mean, no one would ever seen it before. So I know I've experienced that personally, where it's like there's a representation in most of it where I was like, wow, I mean, I know your culture exists. It's just like I just didn't hear about that type of experience before. Then it gives a light bulb of like, oh my gosh, yeah, let's do this.
That was really good. Who wants to follow up to that?
I'll follow up now just so I could piggyback off of it. I don't think I could have said it any better. Again, I think it's just about collaboration and coming together as a community. I think one of the reasons why there's so many different organizations around mental health and so many efforts in DEI is because it's so needed, and it's becoming more and more accepted. So I think just um, the different entry points to learning and the different ways of, maybe they hear about changing tides and then they hear about the next organization or the other one or the one that's located on the East Coast. It's like, I think just the different entry points allow for different ways to learn about what's available and what resources there are and what communities exist. And I think all of us coming here today and talking with one another is exactly how we accomplish that.
I feel so inspired and so grateful to be among all of you in this virtual Zoom room. Yeah, definitely, Matthew, that really resonates. There's so many ways to enter, to identify how you want to make an impact. And I think reflecting on our conversation, the theme, how much we talked about our families and kind of being dissatisfied with the status quo has led all of us to the work kind of that we're doing now or planning to do. And getting away from this kind of isolated, self-reliant mentality to a more expansive, abundant, connected existence, I think is what is going to, I hope, characterize the future that I'm living in. That's what I want to be a part of.
You all took the words out of my mouth. Yeah, I'll just circle back to kind of that whole like self-advocacy conversation that we were having. I think in starting in East Health and kind of figuring out my own leadership style and, like what my strengths are and et cetera, et cetera. I think one thing I really learned is that if we want things to change, like we can't just sit by and operate within the confines of the current system. I think part of our jobs as leaders is to serve as that role model that like we didn't have a lot of. There's not a ton of Asian Americans in positions of leadership and positions of power, elected officials, et cetera. And I think that can be minimizing, but if we can start to be that for the next generation and help educate others on the change that we want to see, I think that advocacy work and our voices to share our stories and inspire others is like one of the most powerful things that we can leverage in order to create that change. So
I love that so much, Nisha, and everyone who just spoke. I am so inspired by you all and the great work that you're all doing in the world to uplift our AAPI voices and experiences. And stepping up in our roles as not just citizens, but as leaders, as Nisha said, because my experience growing up is that I didn't see anybody like me in those positions that I could look up to, that I could say that's a path for me or that's possible for me. So it's so important that we're all shining our light in whatever role that we're playing in the world, and that unity and that collaboration and keeping love at the forefront to and I think trust in the process that it all starts in our hearts. I think in every arena in your life. So if you want to make a change, I think it all starts here, and it's even step like what you're scared about, like what I'm scared about when I speak up. It's stepping into that role and just doing it anyway. Feel the fear and doing it anyway, knowing that that's how you're going to not only help yourself heal, but also help someone else, be inspired by your actions and I think just collaboration, learning from each other, keeping an open heart and open mind. So thank you for sharing space with me today. I'm so inspired by you all.
Yeah, thank you everyone again for your participation. And I know a couple of you have some events going on for your organizations. If you want to just give a quick like what's coming up. If not, I'm also going to put them in the descriptions and put all your links, whatever you all want to send me. But I know for sure, like Matthew and Nisha, both of you have some upcoming events if you want to just give them a quick shout out.
Sure. We have our Changing Tides third annual Ripple Effect Walk for Suicide Prevention on June 22nd in Torrance, California. So if you're in SoCal, we would love to see you there. And also, I was lucky enough to have both Sam and Aussie on the Changing Tides podcast. So if you want to go back and listen to that episode, it's over on the Changing Tides podcast on all streaming platforms.
For us, two announcements. One is that we just recently launched our services in 3 new states. So Washington, as well as Florida and Massachusetts, and then of course California and New York, where we've been operating. So if you live in one of those new states and are in need of mental health support for the AAPI community, just consider signing up. We'd love to help you. And then the second one is for people who are interested but might be in need of more financial assistance. We have a scholarship program called the Restoration Scholarship that we are launching a new cohort of soon. So if that's of interest, all you have to do right now is stay tuned and join our distribution list on our website, and you'll be the first to know when we launch, so that you can sign up for 1 free month of care.
Thank you. And Joanna and Kelly, do either of you have any events coming up you want to share?
Nothing public at the moment.
Awesome.